It hasn't even been a day since Trump announced a potential deal with Iran. Now the situation has flipped. Iran has closed the Strait of Hormuz and fired on a tanker. Inside the White House, the Situation Room is active. Pay attention to who is at the table. It's the same lineup we saw on the eve of the February 28th conflict. Everything was moving toward peace, talks were happening, the shipping lanes were clear, and oil was down. So why the sudden U-turn? If you believe this is just business as usual, you're missing the bigger picture. There's something vital buried in the details. Chronology is critical here. Just yesterday, Trump publicly stated that a deal was close. Axios reported a framework agreement. Iran opened the strait, formally citing the ceasefire in Lebanon. And then, less than 24 hours later, the Iranian side announced the restoration of strict military control over the Strait of Hormuz. IRGC spokesperson Ebrahim Salfakari put it bluntly, control has returned to its previous state and will remain there until the US ends the blockade of Iranian ports. But it's more than just rhetoric. Iranian forces opened fire near a tanker passing through the zone. This is no longer just talk, this is action. In response, the US announced that in the coming days, the military will begin intercepting and seizing oil tankers and merchant ships linked to Iran in international waters. According to the Wall Street Journal, the goal is to force Tehran to reopen the strait and concede on its nuclear program. Now, here is where it gets interesting. Look closely at this detail. On Saturday, President Trump called an emergency, closed-door meeting in the White House Situation Room. No comments from the White House, no press releases, no briefings. We only know about this meeting because journalists spotted General Dan Kane, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, leaving the White House alone, without security, clearly trying to avoid the press. It appears the presence of military leadership was intentionally hidden. The attendees included Vice President Vance, Secretary of State Rubio, Defense Secretary Hegseth, Treasury Secretary Bessent, CIA Director Ratcliffe, Chief of Staff Wiles, Special Envoy Witkoff, and General Kane. This is the exact same lineup that gathered in the Situation Room just before the war against Iran began on February 28th. The same room, the same people, the same secrecy. A coincidence? Perhaps. But these are the kinds of coincidences you cannot ignore. Meanwhile, another critical story is unfolding regarding the nuclear file. Trump publicly claimed Iran agreed to hand over enriched uranium from sites in Isfahan, Natanz, and Fordo, the very ones damaged during the bombings. Trump literally said, "We'll be hauling the material out from under the rubble with excavators." The Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesperson, Esmail Baghaei, hit back hard. Iran never discussed handing over enriched uranium to the Americans. That option was never on the table. Quote, "Enriched uranium is as sacred to us as the soil of Iran, and it will not be transferred anywhere under any circumstances." Baghaei added that reports of Iran's readiness to stop enrichment are nothing more than media pressure on negotiators. This means one thing: the nuclear issue hasn't moved an inch. It is exactly where it was before the war started. There were talks, there were words, but no fundamental concessions from Tehran. Against this backdrop, a US delegation is still flying to Islamabad. Stephen Witkoff and Jared Kushner. Trump himself described the nature of these talks with brutal honesty. It's a last chance for a deal he doesn't personally believe in. He added, "If it doesn't work the easy way, it will work the hard way." One telling detail, Vice President Vance did not join the trip. The official reason was a logistical delay with security, but an experienced observer sees a signal. The level of the delegation has been intentionally downgraded. When you want to show serious intent, you send the vice president. When you want room to maneuver, you send envoys. On the Iranian side, the stance remains rigid. Baghaei called the American blockade illegal and criminal. Negotiating optimism? Zero. And here is the detail that reveals how the White House truly views the near future. On Friday, Treasury Secretary Bessent publicly stated the US would not extend the sanctions waiver on Russian oil because the issues with Hormuz are over and the global market is stable. 24 hours passed. Iran closed the strait, and suddenly the US Treasury Department issued an emergency extension for the license to trade Russian oil until May 16th. This happened immediately after that secret meeting in the Situation Room. This isn't an accident. It's insurance. The White House is preparing for a scenario where the strait stays closed. If that happens, the global market will need an alternative source, and Russian oil fills that role. When words contradict actions, always watch the actions. Well, here is the map. Negotiations are ongoing, but with no real expectation of a breakthrough. Strait is closed again. US is preparing to seize ships. Situation Room met with the same faces we saw before the war. Nuclear question is in limbo. Ceasefire expires on April 21st. We are only days away. If something unexpected happens in Islamabad or hostilities resume, Trump said, the easy way or the hard way. To all appearances, the easy way isn't working. Stay tuned. We'll have a new update immediately after Islamabad. Subscribe so you don't miss it. Talk soon.